to Behavioral Grooves, the podcast that explores human behavior through a behavioral science lens. I'm Kurt.
And I am Tim. We like to explore why we do what we do with researchers, authors, and practitioners in a conversational setting in order to bring those insights to you. Oh, and we usually mix in a bit of music with this too.
So while we have always mixed music with behavioral science, we have not interviewed an actual full-time musician on the show until today.
I would say she's just a bit more than just a musician. In fact, I might call her a polymath, a Renaissance woman, a pansophic human being, a groundbreaking, rule-bending, multi-talented individual who can't be tied down to conventional labels or characterizations. So there.
Wow. All right. So you obviously picked up on her ability to use language in ways that not many of our guests could match. And I would have to agree, there is no way that I would ever describe her as just a singer.
So, of course, we're talking about our guest on this episode, and that's Dessa. Dessa is a singer, rapper, writer, speaker, science and philosophy connoisseur, podcast host, and ice cream flavor inventor. You know that. Yeah, I know you know this, Kurt, but I've got to tell you that Dessa's Existential Crunch ice cream, it's made up of crème fraîche brown sugar ice cream with Jameson Irish Whiskey, Disaronno Amaretto Liqueur, and a cashew and praline pecan brittle crunch. Oh, man, that is ice cream that packs a punch, baby.
Yeah, well, you gotta love ice cream, right? So Dessa has made a career of bucking genres and defying expectations. Her resume as a musician includes being part of the Doomtree collective, as well as a lot of solo artist work, performances at Lollapalooza and Glastonbury, co-compositions for 100 voice choirs, performances with the Minnesota Orchestra, and top 200 entries on the Billboard charts. She also contributed to the #1 album, the Hamilton Mixtape. And as a writer, she's been published by the New York Times and National Geographic Traveler, and she's published a memoir-in-essays called My Own Devices. Fantastic read, and has 2 additional literary collections that she's published.
Yeah, now she's the host of a new podcast that explores why we do the things we do, called Deeply Human.
That tagline sounds awful familiar, Tim. Where might have I heard that before? Why we do the thing? I don't know. I can't. It's just not quite connecting there.
Well, her new adventure absolutely relates to the work that we are doing on this podcast, and that is exploring why we do what we do with a behavioral science lens, albeit she does have the backing of the BBC and American public media, so maybe not quite the same.
That's kind of nice to have the backing of the BBC and American public media, right? All right. So beyond just being fans of her music and talking about her new podcast, we wanted to talk to Dessa because we thought we could explore the intersection of music and emotion. We explored that intersection along with some of the experiments Dessa did with her own brain to try to scientifically move beyond a heartbreak that she had.
That sounds like such a downer, but I got to tell you, the conversation was not. It was fun and fascinating. And so right now, we would like to invite you to sit back with a big, deep glass of humanness and enjoy our conversation with Dessa. Dessa, welcome to Behavioral Grooves.
Thanks for having me.
We are very, very excited to have you, and we're going to start with a speed round. So let's just start. You know, you've spent a lot of time on the road. So would you prefer to travel on your free time, given a world where we can actually travel in our free time, on a fixed itinerary or no itinerary at all?
No itinerary, hands down.
Love that. All right, Dessa, do you prefer coffee or tea?
Coffee.
That was fast. Good.
Wow.
There seems like no delay there, right?
Yeah. Do you think we need a word for the deep sense of personal loss that comes with the approaching end of a TV series that you've been binge watching?
I think it's called parasocial anxiety.
Parasocial breakup. There you go.
Breakup? Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, it's a parasocial relationship that you have with those characters that aren't real, and so it's a breakup when that ends. But yeah, that's. I know you tweeted about that a little while ago. So.
Yeah. Yes, that was good. Thank you.
All right, Dessa. Would you rather host a podcast about music or a podcast about how science can help explain the human condition?
I feel like this is an alley-oop. Like the experimenters are in fact my Confederates on this one. I love my career as a musician, but I really like talking about science.
And you are going to do that. You have a brand new podcast coming out, Deeply Human, which has the tagline, Why We Do the Things We Do. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about that podcast and what it is?
Yeah, it's driven essentially by the motor of curiosity. And in every episode, I talk to a few researchers and experts in their field, really across disciplines, to try to explain some facet of human behavior. And then I do my best to communicate with those experts in a way that kind of nudges them off the standard interview script if I can. So I do a lot of social media lurking to figure out have they got kids, what do these people like as people, And I think culturally we have sort of a regrettable partition between science and the rest of the world. But really, science is a daily practice. I'm looking right now, let's see, at 3 yellow roses on my table that are all dead. And I don't know why. Do you know what I mean? So next time, I'll try to put them in a bigger vase and see if that helps, or put them closer to the window. That's science. That's using observed data, right, to do a series of tests to try to achieve better results. And I think in our society, we imagine that science is relegated to these hermetically sealed rooms where dudes in white coats run around with Bunsen burners and beakers. And so anything I can do to relax that partition, I'm interested in, because I think that better understanding ourselves can help us make better choices. And it's just a more interesting way to live.
I agree with that 100%. And Alan Alda is actually doing he has a podcast that is trying to take scientific and bring it into scientific language and bring it into the common vernacular and get scientists to talk to regular people. And it's kind of what we're doing with this podcast is we're trying to take those elements around behavioral science and that human condition aspect and let people understand how they can apply that into their lives every single day. So I know you've interviewed Dr. Barry Schwartz and Dr. Helen Fisher on your first episode, but who else are you getting to talk to?
Oh man, it's been a really, really wide spectrum of researchers. It's been fun. So people from all around the world who study what it's like to be conscious and have a sense of self. Who study why we get deja vu and what that might mean. Yeah, what does that mean about how our memory works, if anything? And do we all experience deja vu the same way? Spoiler alert, no, we do not. Just had an insane conversation with this woman who, my jaw was in my own palm for the majority of the conversation. She's having these paralyzingly intense bouts of deja vu, and she just imagines that's what it's like to feel alive, that everybody has that. Because, it's we don't very often have the occasion to rigorously compare subjective experiences. It's that old kind of stoner question, what if red looks different to you than red looks different from, that's a great question.
It is.
It is a great
more
question.
dominoes. Yeah.
It is a great question. Tim, a long time ago, helped me discover that I have a condition called aphantasia, which is that I have a blind mind's eye. So when most people close their eyes, they can picture things in their head. When I close my eyes, it's black. I just kind of get, fragments of things. And I thought that's how everybody was. And it wasn't until we had some conversation about it. So it is those weird little things that if you pay attention and you notice, those are fun. Those are really interesting aspects.
Wait a minute. When other people close their eyes, it's not black.
Yeah, so if you think about an apple, right? If I asked you to close your eyes and think about an apple, what do you see?
I mean, technically I see blackness, but like appleness comes to mind. I know, you know, I know the shape of it, but I don't see the shape of it.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You should go out. There's some tests online that you can go out and see if you have aphantasia. It's about 3%, 3 to 4% of the population is what they say it is. And so there's some tests around it and very different things. Actually, one of the guests that we're hoping to have is one of the leading experts on this. So
cool.
Yeah. Anyway, we digress, which is what we do.
That's exactly what we do. Yeah. So Dessa, I'm curious about like the bridge into podcasting. We got a preview. Just spoiler alert for listeners. We did get a preview of what your first episode's like. And it was so cool because it was so you. Like there was nothing about that, what we heard that wasn't you. And so this high degree of authenticity comes through. It was super cool. Were you intentional about that? Was it like, okay, I really like, I want to make sure that I stay really true to me or stay true to this sort of persona or self-image? How did you go about that?
Well, I mean, first, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us, to some degree, when you do your hair in the morning, you know, or you check yourself out in the mirror, I guess, after you get dressed, or if you're someone who wears makeup, you know, as you put blush, let's say, on your cheeks. I think we have a practiced mirror face that is our most attractive sort of like posture of our features, and we know it. And I think similarly, like when we're maybe recording our own voicemail message. Hi, it's Dessa. I'm not here. Like you hear that total, like there's a little bit of BS, right? That's like, it's a performative thing. And I mean, I think naturally, just as people, we have, you know, that impulse to put our polished self forward. But I think as an artist, you know, a lot of the effort that I've spent learning how to use language is to try to figure out how to drop the veils when possible. You know, I feel really connected to people on the occasion that they're willing to present themselves kind of unfiltered, you know, whether that's because you sat next to somebody on a plane, right? So you're never going to see them again, you know, so you can afford to be candid because there's no social price to pay. So yeah, I knew that when I was doing the podcast that trying to find a way to connect this fascinating research to like lived experience, and then to try to present that lived experience with the skills that I had learned as a writer of creative nonfiction. So to try to find a sweet spot between science and kind of a literary art, if I could. Mm-hmm.
Well, you have done a very fantastic job with that. You bringing your mother in on the first episode as well, kind of bringing some of that realistic life kind of, hey, you want to manage my Tinder for me and everything else. So that was really, really good. You talk about this mix between bringing this literary aspect that you've honed for years and trying to, you know, what did you say? Get rid of the veil. And you do that, I think, a lot with your lyrics as well. And one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about is this this mix between emotions and music and how they get intertwined. And, you know, for your perspective, do you think, you know, how do you think music and emotions get intertwined?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is one of those questions that you could chase down for a lifetime, and researchers have. So I shouldn't say could, that people have. In fact, I mean, my dad was a classical musician when I was a girl. He played classical guitar, and before I was born, he played the lute. So yeah, like a real, I don't know, like an artist's artist, if that makes sense. You know, it's like you don't go into Elizabethan lute music for the money, and and the kind of, I don't know, like he's an old world scholar in a lot of ways, driven by passion, very autodidactic, you know, but listening to him play this unamplified instrument, you know, for these kind of many hours of as close as, I don't know, maybe as close as I got to like a or as he got at that time, to like a sacred feeling. Even him, who took the thing so seriously, and his instrument was so precious, and when you open the case, it's a really distinct smell coming off the wood and the kind of soft fabrics that protected it. Even in like subsequent conversations with him about why music is so affecting, and why it cleaves us open so wide, he said that he was ready to concede that perhaps it really was just, in his term, mental masturbation, that there was something about the way that the human brain was sensitive to patterns, that responded essentially to those patterns in acoustic form. So I do think that there's a school of thought that need be seriously considered, which is like, hey, some parts of our behavior and our bodily traits too might develop as a byproduct of other stuff. So like, for example, to be sensitive enough to the complicated syntactical and grammatical patterns that it takes to do language, you're accidentally hella sensitive to these other patterns too. We're just pattern junkies, I do think that that's one way, that's one answer to be considered. And on the other hand too, we've got these ideas about what it takes to synchronize human behavior, and how a sensitivity to music might have, if we were to look at it from kind of an evolutionary perspective again, maybe that sensitivity to music helps us synchronize our work, helps us synchronize our wars, helps us synchronize our movements. And then, of course, the lullaby stuff. Is it a self-soothing thing, Does it have to do in some ways with, like, our preference against the wire monkey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and when you talk about synchronizing, just to clarify, is that a synchronicity with or synchronous experience with other people, or just within ourselves?
The way that I was using it in that sentence was with other people as a social tool, but you might well be referencing stuff that I don't know anything about. I think music making as a self-soothing tool, I can imagine that. As far as, synchronizing, I was thinking about, in a modern context, I guess, like, what is the drummer boy? Why on earth would you put a little kid with a drum in a war? Because it's helpful, not only to rouse passions, but it might be helpful to synchronize footfalls. And when we're doing, I've seen some interesting songs that are used for like human jackhammering. So like right now we have or where I live anyway, when there's jackhammering to be done, and you might be able to hear some outside my window at the moment. For that, I apologize. But we have like a mechanical thing that goes right? Well, in some places where you're using human power for that, you need everybody to jump at the same time on essentially like a pogo stick without a spring that you're all jumping on to drive it into the ground. And so there are some good songs that you can do at speed to help everybody jump at the right time. That kind of stuff. Labor syncing. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I know, Tim, you've talked about music being one of the oldest forms of communal aspect, right? The beat, the rhythms, that you've done some research into that. And it sounds very similar to what you're talking about there, Dessa, that this is a way of synchronizing not just the actions of those people trying to, jackhammer their manual jackhammer into the ground, but also just how we... Oop, there's your background noise in New York, right?
100%. Sorry. Yeah.
It's a podcast. That's what this is all about. It's all good.
Real, yeah.
But there's this aspect of the synchronization with the others around you that just draws you together. And I think it's a really interesting concept that music has this emotional bonding capability. And I know you've talked about the kind of the feeling you get when you're in concert, and granted, you haven't probably been able to play live in a while, but do you ever feel that connectivity with your bandmates, if you're playing with Doomtree or just the other, like Abby or anybody else that you're playing with on a normal basis? And then do you feel that with the audience as well? Is there some sort of sense of getting in a groove that you feel?
To be honest, I sort of consider that the job. It's like how, at least for live performance, right?
Right.
How to get everybody in this room feeling the same way. That's sort of what live performance is. And if you see, kind of attention wander, well, you're an attention shepherd. Like, it's your job to try to bring it back, and you develop skills that make the proposition of attending to what is happening on stage more attractive than the proposition of attending to the recent text message. That's your job, is to make sure that you've got more on your side of the scale. Yeah.
So I'd like to jump back to just the development of the podcast, because you talked about curiosity. You mentioned almost casually, well, you were just curious. It's one thing to just be curious. It's another thing to say, well, I'm going to start a podcast about this. I think that there's another level of curiousness. So could you talk a little bit about sort of the catalyst for that curiosity, and at what level did you get to a point where it was like, oh, I got to do something about this?
Yeah. I mean, in some way I feel like, I've been pretty curious naturally, I think, since I was a little girl. The questions like, why? Very, very much my vibe. The constant whys, as a kid to my parents. So, I didn't start this podcast from whole cloth. I was lucky enough to receive an email from a colleague that said, hey, I know that there is this joint project between the BBC and American Public Media, and they might be looking for a host who's American. Would you have any interest, essentially, in having your hat tossed into the ring? And the answer was like, oh my God, yes. Yes, I would have, both hands all the way up. I was thrilled by the opportunity to essentially interview for it, So on my next tour through London at a small club, I got to meet with, one of the top brass at the BBC, who was kind enough to come to my tiny green room backstage and have a conversation amidst all these open suitcases and before sound check. And I got the gig and was thrilled. So over the past year and a half, maybe 2 years, I've spent a lot of time going back and forth between London and the US to work with that production team. They've got great researchers, great producers, and also just learn how this stuff is done, and one of the favorite things for me, one of the favorite parts of the gig is the opportunity to be a student in that way again. I mean, that sounds like cheesy because you can be a student at all times, but to have an opportunity professionally to take my curiosity seriously, because I think a lot of times we really do write off curiosity as an after hours gig, whereas I think it should be way more. We've had conversations culturally about hey, play is important, rest is important. We're kind of resurrecting these human activities from the margins, I think, of our free time, to understand their importance to just health of a human organism. And I kind of think I'd love to see curiosity receive a similar treatment.
It's so true that you can always be that learner, but there is an aspect that comes with a podcast that you get to actually talk to some of the leading researchers in the world, that if you called them up randomly out of the blue, they're not going to necessarily talk to you, but you get to have that conversation with them. So it's Tim and I, it's one of the things that we love about this. And we love the concept of just being able to take those conversations that we have then and share them with a larger audience. So hopefully that we can invite them into that conversation. So learning does become more of this, hey, not just a thing that happens on the weekends or in the evenings on the peripheral of life, but more integrated into what we're doing. So love that concept that you're doing there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You're right. I maybe I buried the lead. They talk back is the most exciting part. They are willing to talk to me, and I can say hey, I'm from the BBC. We're talking to, talk to me. And then, being able to read these incredible books, try to come up with some really rad questions, and speak to people whose minds are working on issues that I find absolutely fascinating. And maybe just to piggyback on your point, this idea that, not only is learning not relegated to the weekends, but when learning is is like driven by natural curiosity, no matter what that is. If you're really into dog breeds, like that's not my thing. But if you're really into dog breeds and what is a purebred, or if you're really into like, I don't know, like black holes, or, kids, when they're really into dinosaurs, that's not vegetables then. That's the fun part, And I think a lot of times, learning still, I don't know, is vegetables when we're adults.
So I want to get back into some of the musical components that you do, and bringing in some of the elements of how you write in your music, and again, tying that back to the emotional aspect of it. And so you've talked about how many of your songs are sad love songs, and you even describe that as a romantic devastation as kind of maybe a musical genre that you might have. And in your TED Talk, you talked about how actually most of those sad songs were about one guy. And for lack of a better term, there's probably some emotional baggage that you were trying to work through. Was writing about that, was that a form of self-therapy for you, or was it just the rumination that you couldn't get it out of your mind, and it was the only thing that was coming into your head when you were thinking about those, or did it help you in some way?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to tell in some ways because you can't run the same life twice, so there is no control life for me to compare stuff to. Like, what if I hadn't written all those songs? I will say that it didn't feel like it was driven by like a therapeutic impulse. But I've had friends check me on that, to be honest, too, and or ask me to at least reconsider it. But I will say that, and so in some ways you might hear, I don't know, like a superciliousness even, but I take like art writing real differently than journal writing, if that makes sense. It's like, I have a journal, Yeah. I don't need, it would feel strange for me to subject strangers to my journal because what I would ask of a journal isn't necessarily like, I don't know. It's self-interested, right? Whereas when I'm making art, my only objective is not to purge myself or make myself feel better. It's to try to forge connection. So it's like in the same way that if I were having the conversation with you guys, right? And I don't know. And I'm talking on and on about like baby pictures or something. Like, you don't know this person. Do you know what I mean? And we've all probably been in conversations where people are like perhaps demonstrating an inadequate regard for our attention. I try to be communicative with art, which means that I'm being mindful, I hope, of the listener's time and attention, and I want to make sure that I'm earning and rewarding it. Yeah.
So with that, are you trying to get an emotional response from the music? I mean, and from the lyrics that you're bringing? Is that the intent, or because a lot of your music is narrative, right? You're telling kind of pretty intense stories as they're going through, and narratives are emotional. That's how we learned in the past. That's how we evolved in this storytelling way of passing on culture and different pieces. But it was also a way to evoke emotion. And is that purposeful on your part, or is it just kind of how you've always done it and it's worked?
Gosh, maybe both. I mean, yes, I do. Okay. I do hope that my music would elicit strong emotional responses, but I'm careful to try to be unduly prescriptive. So because I work almost entirely in nonfiction, at least when I'm writing true stories, I'll say that. So maybe I'll separate the two. When I'm writing true songs, right, I feel like my job is to communicate it as well as I can, to paint the pictures, to come up with some really memorable and unique, metaphors, right? If I can, to pace the thing well, to make sure that when I use a pronoun, it's what it's referring to, which is surprisingly easy to not do. Like, it's a lot of times, like if you actually ask in a song, like, to what does the word he? They're like, oh, I thought that was the dog. Like, no, dude, that's the husband. Like, oh, I see why. The last thing I mentioned was the dog. Like, to make sure that the language, does its work, and then to try to write some, of course, like rad harmonies and deliver it cool. But I also am mindful of the fact that in my experience, the way that true stories work, right? Very often they'll resonate in the overlap of the Venn diagram between two lives, right? So it's like, if you're what struck me when I was a young girl reading The Diary of Anne Frank, right, probably had to do with our shared youth. That's different, right? If I were a Jewish man reading Anne Frank in 1975, right? Like their shared identity might resonate most, and so I know that the parts of the true stories that I write, if they do their work and resonate in the hearts of strangers, right, I don't get to pick exactly what chamber buzzes, but I trust that the truth does its own work. Like a really good true story, well told, with the appropriate amount of conflict and drama and sincerity and vulnerability, right? Like I think it's going to work differently for different people. Yeah.
Well, you talk about when you've got a journal, you have that off to the side. You've got songs for performance and for recording and for a whole variety of other reasons. You're not going to share the baby pictures, so to speak, with necessarily with someone that you don't know. But that happens to you, at live shows, right? People are coming up and wanting to share their, metaphorically speaking, their baby pictures with you.
They'll start because they'll sort of point to the area of overlap in our lives. They'll say, hey, I had a really, really rough time getting over someone, and I've been keeping it secret for a long time because I was embarrassed. Okay, well, they know what our overlap is. I didn't know, but they did because they listened to the song. So now we already are operating in this kind of, like shared garden or whatever. Or sometimes they'll say, I'm Puerto Rican and I grew up in the Midwest, and I don't know what to make of it, and I don't feel Puerto Rican enough, and I don't. Oh, okay, I totally feel you, man. I know what you're talking about. So they've done the work of identifying what our shared experiences might be a lot of the time. So yeah, in some ways, like they know better what we have in common because they've been able to kind of flip through the record. So
yeah, and I think building a relationship is built upon those shared connections, and so if they can shortcut that by taking some information from the work that you've put out, it only just makes that connection happen a little bit sooner and maybe a little bit more deep. And it's a positive thing, I think. So I want to get back to another piece of your work. And you wrote about this in your essays, Call Off Your Ghost, which describes a little experiment that you did on yourself. And again, it was based on some insights from Dr. Helen Fisher, and I'd love to hear about your, now having had that chance to talk to her. I wonder how that is. But you used an EEG and an fMRI, and some of your fans helped out. Can you tell a little bit for our listeners about what that story is? Yeah.
So, as you mentioned, I'd had this, I had just a really protracted, romantic relationship, and then this sort of gray area between dating and not dating, and then just feeling heartbroken about it all. And it just seemed to be lasting a lot longer than it should. I mean, nobody I don't think who's an adult hasn't had their heart really broken. But it was just staying broken for a really, really long time. And then all of a sudden it was just this is a slice of this is not insignificant anymore. This is now a part of my time on earth. I've spent heartbroken over the same person. This feels like a problem, and it doesn't feel healthy. And I don't like the fact that because I'm ruminating on it, maybe it's limiting my art, which I take so as soon as it was touching the art, so I was oh my God. Oh no. Yeah, exactly. And so I was okay, well, what if I undertook this as an artistic project and a science project, essentially? If I were to zoom out and say, well, how does a woman fall out of love if she's determined to? Is there anything you can do? I think a lot of our approaches right now are sort of passive. You do your best to spend the time in a healthy way waiting for yourself to heal, right? You hang out with other friends, you get sleep, you invest yourself in your work, you whatever, meditate, you do hobbies. Okay, well, it wasn't gone yet, and I was doing as good as I can on that stuff. So I I decided to research about what is happening to a body and a mind when it's in love. And all sorts of things are happening to a body and a mind when it's in love. There's going to be signatures in your hormones and in your pulse rate potentially, when you're around the person who excites you. But also, I wanted to know, like, what's the neuroscience that we know about love? I mean, we know that some substances, some chemicals essentially, like oxytocin are involved, maybe vasopressin as well. But in studying, I kind of stumbled in my research upon this TED Talk by Dr. Helen Fisher, who had really studied the neuroscience of love. So she's talking about which neuroanatomical structures are involved. Some at the front of your head, anterior cingulate, and the caudate, and the VTA, the ventral tegmental area, and I was fascinated by that idea. It just hadn't really occurred to me that there might be particular structures that were really associated with our subjective feeling of love, Mm-hmm. And so after learning about her work, I thought, okay, well, if that's how the brain behaves when it's in love, like, is there any way to change that brain's behavior to fall out of love? And so I started just doing some research of my own into neurofeedback, which is, as you said, it's an approach that is designed to use EEG or QEEG technology. So if you imagine like people with a lot of little sensors like stuck on their scalp, like in the movies, and then wires coming from those sensors. They don't go into your brain. They're just measuring the electricity through your skull and scalp, essentially, to figure out which parts of your brain are most active in any given moment. And neurofeedback is sometimes used as an intervention for people who might have like a behavioral issue that they're trying to ameliorate that might be associated with like autism. I think it's also used with it is associated also with like epilepsy. So I'd wondered, like, if here's this technique, that's being used as a potential intervention to try to change brain behavior, could it be used to focus on the parts of the brain that are associated with romantic attachment? Now, what I wasn't doing is like Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. I wasn't like, hey, let's do a lobotomy. And I wasn't like, hey, can we wipe out all memory of this dude? In some ways, it's just like, okay, yes, like if you want to be stronger, or more flexible, you go to the gym and you stretch. Does that last forever? No, you have to stay going to the gym and stretching, So like, are there any mental exercises or mental interventions that I could undertake? That might help me get over this dude. And so I just really quickly want to say a shout out to the two primary researchers and scientists who I worked with. So the first one was Penny Jean Gracefire. So she was the person who worked on the neurofeedback with me. And then Dr. Cheryl Ullman at the University of Minnesota. She did the fMRI stuff. So that's when for people who can't quite picture it, it's like that sort of tube that you'd be like gurneyed into, that you'd be wheeled into, where then you can see like a picture of your brain, and you can see all the swirling colors superimposed on it that indicate which parts of your brain are active at any given moment.
Yeah, and so you had these two people, and you were able to go through and do an fMRI to begin with, and then you go and did some of your training around that brain flexibility as you going to the gym to work your brain out on it, and then got back in the fMRI. And were you able to maybe help in that romantic winterland that you were stuck in? Yeah,
I mean, I want to be careful to be like, hey, I'm a sample size of one. Do you know what I mean? So if you flip a coin,
we understand this. This is your story. This is your narrative.
I know, but I want to communicate it for your listeners too, that like, if you flip a coin and it lands heads and then you stop flipping that coin, you can't be like, oh, it's a heads coin. It's like, yeah, exactly. The number of trials is important. But for me, we did see difference in short. Like I went in to take a before picture of my brain while thinking about this guy. right? And we tried to do like a single blind study so that I was looking at this guy that I was really into, and then another dude who just sort of looked like that guy, but who I wasn't into. So I was borrowing from the protocol of Dr. Helen Fisher. She had done that was the protocol that she had used when she was trying to figure out how our brains behave when we think about our beloved. So we measured the way that my brain responded to like cute guys who looked similar, but only one of whom, I was actually in love with. We recorded that data. The data was very strong. So when I was looking at the dude I liked, the researcher could guess right away who was who. So they were like, I'm pretty sure it's, dude A is the dude that you're into. And we used several photos of each of them to make sure it wasn't a response to a photo.
Wow.
And then I went away for several weeks and I did I think 9 sessions of neurofeedback. And I went back into the fMRI, right, to revisit those pictures and to see if my brain was still responding in those areas in such a strong and selective way for this dude. And the response was, in my brain, markedly muted. It did not jump in the same, like, puppy-ish way that it had in the first trials. Did I feel better? Yeah, a little. Was my honest response. I did a little. I mean, I still had all the same memories, and in some ways, the way I've described it in the TED Talk was like, I had all the same feelings, which after a long and hard relationship are myriad. Love, tenderness, jealousy, anger, charity, like all those feelings. But like the good ones had risen to the surface, and I just wasn't. I wasn't so fixated, I guess. I wasn't so compelled in the same way.
Yeah.
Sometimes we ask our guests in the speed round, would you prefer to have dinner with a musician or an athlete? Most of them say musician, but I got to say, you are the poster child for why the answer should always be musician.
Oh, very kind.
Okay, but what's on your playlist right now? What are you listening to? Like
music-wise, you mean?
Yeah.
Or just generally?
If we were to construe playlist as music, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm doing the podcasting thing lately. Okay, like I like some vocal music from faraway places. So let's see the Bulgarian London Choir. They're pretty rad. And then I was checking out some releases from my home state and my hometown of Minneapolis. Lady Midnight. Cool. Put out some rad stuff, and the artist Mayada on Instagram does some really cool piano performances where she takes requests. So I try to catch those too.
Very cool. Well, we are Minneapolis based, so we are definite hometown people here. So, and we always so. Part of Behavioral Grooves is Tim and I misunderstood. We both agreed on the name right away, but we both misunderstood. We had different things on it. I thought it was about the behavioral grooves in the mind and kind of the grooves that we form, and Tim was thinking it's behavior and music combined. So we ask questions like this to all of our guests. So do you listen to music when you work? Now, obviously, as a musician, that's part of it, but you do writing and other things around that. So do you listen to music when you work, or is it too distracting for you?
I cannot listen to music with words when I work, but yeah, I sometimes do listen to the kind of curated playlists that are designed for people who are working or studying. So like a simple piano, I enjoy. But if the music has words, my brain can't write very well. It's distracted by the language. And then also, like, I think if there's really big dynamic, emotional swells, I also lean into it a little bit too hard, at the expense of my productivity. So. Yeah. Well,
if you could talk a little bit more about that, because I think this is a particularly interesting to talk to you about, is because you sort of know the nuances of music, right? So when you say that you could listen to sort of simple piano music, could you just expand on that a little bit? Like, how simple, does it need to be? Is it like smooth jazz kind of stuff, or
Yeah, sure. So maybe like an Eric Satie or a Jan Tersen. So you're talking about maybe like one person at the piano as opposed, and there's maybe sort of like a monodynamic to it. So it's not these huge, like really fast, hyper percussive, like anything that's really aggro, and has a lot of, I think, like, aggressive percussive elements.
Yeah, you're not going to listen to Chopin's.
I'm distracted.
Yeah, you're not going to do Chopin's mazurkas while solo piano while you're working. That's just not going to work.
It's funny. I'm not a fan of Chopin, but that word mazurka is so cool. I have tried to incorporate that into a writing or a rap song for so long. I think it's so rad.
Well, I just have to say, anybody that can write a song about a chaconne, an entire song, you can do this. You can do this. So.
Thank you.
Dessa, I know our time is short here, so thank you very much. This has been super, super fun. Tim and I are both big fans, and we're just super impressed with not only your music, but also just your curiosity, as you say, and you're delving into this human condition. And great luck to you with your podcast. It's fantastic. So all of our listeners, go out and listen to that when it comes out. Actually, it'll be out when we do this, so make sure that you listen. Thanks, Dessa.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, guys.
Welcome to our grooving session, where Tim and I are going to groove on what we learned from our discussion with Dessa, have a free-flowing conversation, and talk about whatever else comes into our fanboy brains. Well, my fanboy brain. You're not quite the same level of fanboy as I am.
That's because it's really hard to reach your level of fanboyism when it comes to Dessa.
All right. So the Latin, it might be the devotium extremis or the devotius grupus that I might fall under in that category. Yeah, I've been listening to Dessa for years. It has just been one of those things, and I just truly, truly appreciate her music, the lyrics that she brings, the emotion, and then following just the other stuff that she does as well. So this was, I hope that fanboy didn't necessarily come out in the interview. At least I was trying to keep fanboyism down a little bit.
No, don't worry about it. But you were being real. You were being you. That was the cool thing. And she got it.
Well, that was good. I mean, I truly, it was, we talked about this within the podcast, right? This idea that one of the great things about being a podcast host is that you get to talk to all these really cool people about really cool things. And what could be more cooler for me than to talk with Dessa on this? I thought that was great. So,
and you never would have been able to get 45 minutes with her one-on-one if it wasn't for the podcast. So unless I had been sitting next to her on a plane, which I actually sat behind her on a plane on a trip over to Amsterdam on my way to Kuwait to do a conference. And she was obviously flying over to Europe to do some concerts over there because Abby Wolf was with her. And I forget who else, but I was sitting about 3 or 4 rows behind her. See, that's the fanboyism. That's kind of scary, isn't it? No, it's not scary at all. What would have been scary is if you would have said, "Do you remember me on that plane to Amsterdam? I was like 4 rows behind you." That would have been scary.
But again, I was at that point, I was too scared to even go up to her, after the fact and just say, "Hi, Dessa, I'm Kurt. I'm a big fan." Blah blah blah. But no, But hey, we can talk to her for 45 minutes on the show. It's fantastic. I love it. And by the way, my fanboyism even grew a little bit just because I thought, just because she dropped this gem. And it was this thing that I think probably most people in the interview probably passed over. Maybe this is just me being, super fanboy, right? And picking up on all these little things and just kind of going, oh, I love this even more. But she had this comment called where she said preference against the wire monkey. Yeah. And it was in relationship to the conversation that we had about music being synchronous and pulling people in and the emotional side of it. And it was just this at the end of a sentence that she brought this in. And if you didn't catch it and you didn't understand what she was talking about, you just go, wire monkey, what does that mean? Oh, that's just some weird, lyrical wording. It refers back to Harry Harlow, who was a social psychologist back in the 50s and 60s. And he put these baby monkeys into cages without their mothers. And they had a cloth monkey that didn't give any subsistence versus a wire cold caged monkey that did give sustenance. And what he found is that for the vast majority of the time, those monkeys would be on the cloth because they liked that comfort. They felt there was that need. And it got into a whole component around attachment theory and various different things. And you can say what you want to say about the ethics of what he did with those monkeys, which isn't very good. But just the reference that was just dropped as kind of a sidebar in here. Yeah, bigger fanboy today than I was yesterday. That's all I have to say.
Deservingly so, because she's a remarkable woman, and it was really, really fun to talk with her. But let's make sure that we talk about her curiosity and the role that science plays in her life, because she said that science is a daily practice. How about that?
Yeah, I loved it when she's talking about the flower, the yellow, I forget what was it, yellow roses on her table, whatever it was, and look, they're dying. So now next time she gets, flowers, she's going to use a bigger vase. And it's this constant exploration of things in our lives. And if we think about it, that's what we do. We grow, we move beyond by exploring and doing little scientific experiments. And I thought that was just a fascinating way of thinking about things.
It is she's fantastic with metaphor, right? When she said learning shouldn't be vegetables, like why should learning be such a bad thing? And I think that educators have been working on this for a long time. This isn't a new concept, but it's also really challenging. And we still call out today educators that do a great job of making the learning experience more like eating ice cream than like eating vegetables.
She is an ice cream, inventor. So, we should make that. But so think about that, right? So think about when we talked about this in the show is taking learning out of the margins and bringing it into our everyday world. Hey, if I could live off of ice cream every day, I would live off of ice cream every day.
I know you would. Yeah, I would too.
So, I mean, that I thought was fascinating. And I think where I see a element of this is that a lot of podcasts are able to make some of this learning, hopefully we're doing this, making some of that learning that would normally feel like being forced to eat your vegetables into this concept of, nope, this is ice cream. This is a dessert. If we can add some entertainment into this, if we can bring knowledge in a way that is palatable to our taste, then we're getting people more engaged in this. And I think that's what she's trying to do with her podcast as well. And again, from the first episode that we listened to, I think she's done a fantastic job with it.
Edutainment is an important way of reaching something that we already want, right? Pew Research has indicated that 80% of personal learners say that they pursued knowledge in an area of personal interest because they wanted to learn something that would help make their life more interesting and fulfilling. So we already have the desire for it. But in some ways, the edutainment approach reduces friction and helps more people get into it and to get deeper into the learning side that satisfies us on a very deeply intrinsic level.
Well, going to that same Pew Research back from 2016 on learning, one of the other interesting pieces from that I took out of it was that 69%, almost 70% of people said that learning opened up new perspectives about their lives, which goes again to this aspect that learning should be integrated into our lives, not on the weekends, not in the margins, because it's opening up these new perspectives about our lives. It's helping us live a more fulfilling life. And so how do you tap into that curiosity? Is there a way that we can, beyond just maybe taking learning and putting it into edutainment piece, are there things that we can do as individuals that can increase our curiosity and that can integrate learning into just things we do every day?
Yeah. Well, doesn't that kind of indicate that even in this turbulent and highly divided world that we live in today, that we still have this desire to learn and create new perspectives in our lives? So but I think the openness is lacking right now. That in the particular phase in the world that we're going through right now, people don't want to be open because it's so tribal and so carefully guarded. And we're kind of missing out on this part of us that really wants to learn new perspectives, wants to bring fulfillment and interest to our lives in deeper ways. We're kind of cutting ourselves off, sort of shooting ourselves in the foot, if you will.
I love that idea of openness and that it's kind of closed off. It goes back to maybe just a mindset shift.
Yeah.
That idea that we do have to practice science on a daily basis, that this idea that it is something that we need to search for, this concept of, hey, these flowers are dying in this vase, so next time I need to try something new in order to learn, or this openness of, I'm getting all of my news from X source, so maybe I need to open up and explore an alternative source for that news that will allow me to get a different perspective and maybe learn something new. Or maybe it's just like, what's curious for me today? And let me make sure that I put some time into my day, into my calendar, to go Google that and to go, maybe it's not dinosaurs like it was when I was 5-6 years old. But now it's behavioral science stuff or whatever. And I just, on a total aside, sorry, going down this ramp. One of the best Far Side cartoons I ever saw was this 2-panel thing that said, maybe it wasn't 2-panel, but it was a chart, and it said age and dinosaur knowledge, and it like started really low, and then about age 5, 6, 7 it peaked, and then it went down and down as you got older. But I just thought that was funny, and it reminded me of that.
I think it's fantastic because why shouldn't it just continue to grow and grow and grow? Right? We could continue to add to it, but
unless you're Ross on Friends, but there you go. So, all right, we've just beat that to death, I'm sure. Oh my God. So, all right, I could go on and on and on about this whole conversation because I'm obviously reading way too much into it because of my fanism here. But another piece that she talked about that I thought was fantastic was this lack of our ability to compare subjective experiences, right?
Yeah.
We can't rigorously compare subjective experiences, quote unquote, is what she said. And that's a philosophical topic. This idea of, is the red that you see the same red that I see? And if I look through your eyes, would I call that blue? Because that's what blue looks like to me. But because we all see and talk about things the way that I describe red and the way that you describe red have then taken on different meanings inside of our brain. And all of these subjective experiences are like that. And I thought that was just again, could rip on that for hours. And
yeah, but at the same time, this is one of the reasons that we benefit from science, is to have this large number of subjective experiences can be measured, can be identified, at least maybe not measured, but collectively we can measure them. We don't, it's not like we know the exact impact of a particular song on one person, any one person individually. But neuroscience has demonstrated that a song makes an imprint on your brain that touches many parts of the brain, right? So that every time we hear that song, that imprint gets called back. That basically that sort of landmass of information from all different parts of our brain comes back. And so over many people, over many subjects, over large studies, we do know that music is a very powerful emotional tool because of measuring lots of individual subjective experiences. Pablo Rapolles and Ernest Mashero's recent study, they demonstrated that across a large cross-section of people during the pandemic, music was more healing than exercise, yoga, or sex. So not every single individual, not 100% of the population, but a large preponderance of people believed that music was more healing than lots and lots of other activities. So I think we can collect these individual subjective experiences and potentially make objective observations over them.
Well, another piece of this, and it goes back to, or I'll take it back to, me discovering that I have aphantasia, which again, we briefly talked about in here.
Yeah.
And that was a conversation that I had with you. And it was this whole piece about you remembering where your car was. And I said, what do you mean? That's not how I would be able to do that. And you're going, no, I can see the car and I see where it's parked and this. And I'm going, no, it's just the general image, right? And you're like, no, it's like, this is it. And those conversations that we have with others that explore some of those subjective elements of our lives, I think can lead to greater understanding of ourselves, but also of our interactions with others. So, for instance, because of that, I now understand that, hey, when people talk about seeing things in their brain, they're seeing those differently than how I do.
Yeah.
And that allows me to have a better understanding of people. And I think this is what you're talking about a little bit with the science, but I think it can also happen in our own personal lives by just having that curiosity, going back to curiosity, that curiosity about what do you see in this? What do you feel in these situations? What emotion does this song evoke for you? Those are all conversations that we can have with others that allow us to get a better, for lack of a better word, a better picture in our mind of who that person is. Now, I can't necessarily do that good picture, but that's a side of how this goes. Anyway.
And that's another lovely rabbit hole to go down.
We always go down these rabbit holes. What are you talking about? All right. What else do you want to talk about, Tim? What else did Dessa do because I could go on and on and on. So what were some of the conversation pieces that you want to group on?
Well, as you might imagine, I loved it when she was talking about the importance of music, her music creating a strong emotional response, right? She was careful to not be prescriptive, but I think she talked about herself as an attention shepherd when she's on stage. And so to some degree, the music needs to engage people, right? She really loves this idea of her songs engaging people. And she talked about true songs versus, well, she didn't actually label the songs that weren't sort of true, but there's narrative and fiction in some songs because songwriters are blending a lot of things, or they're writing because they're just drawn to a particular story. And I just thought it was fantastic to hear a songwriter with so much success speak so deliberately and candidly about the way she thinks about writing, the way she processes it.
So you're a songwriter. You have written hundreds, if not thousands, of songs in your life. Do you approach it? How do you approach it?
Very much the same way. I mean, I'm not going to write a song that doesn't have any powerful emotion to me. That's the first measure. If there isn't some strong story to tell that's meaningful to me, what is the point, right? So it has to be my own minimum level of, that's actually exciting. I'd like to listen to that. And then she asked us this, and you may not have picked up on this, but she talked about when she uses it, if she's going to use a pronoun, who does that pronoun refer to? And this is an incredibly powerful thing in writing a song, is to think about who is the person telling the story, and who are they telling the story about? So sometimes the singer is the storyteller, but sometimes the storyteller is not the singer. The singer is actually a third person removed from the storyteller, and then you have to be careful about who he and she might be, where those pronouns actually apply, and simple grammatical things that obviously she's incredibly aware of and sensitive to are oftentimes overrun and not paid attention to by less successful songwriters. So she gets it right.
Yeah, I think so. And I know you do too, to a certain degree. But there's a piece that she said. I'm going to quote. She goes, and again, it was talking about the writing process, and she says, "To paint the picture, to come up with some really memorable and unique metaphors." That was what she's talking about, her job. And I just want to go and just say that is one of the things that I love about Dessa is the metaphors and the philosophical metaphors that she brings in, or they're not necessarily metaphors, but the references to old philosophers. So for instance, in her song Fighting Fish, right? So first off, within that song, she talks about an ink test, right? So she brings in this idea of an ink test. And again, she just drops the ink test part in there without going in deeper or anything like that. But all right, the psychological references in there. Then she talks about the Greek philosopher Zeno. And she talks about Zeno's arrow and how, and so again, if you don't know who Zeno is, it sounds cool, Zeno's arrow. All right, that's just a cool thing. But if you actually know, or you then get interested and curious and you go and research it, like I did, you find out that Zeno was the Stoic philosopher who talked about all these various different things, and that this idea of an arrow is one of his famous mind experiments of how arrow is at any one moment stationary and yet moving. And so how does it move if it's stationary? Again, just fascinating things. And she does that with others. I mean, another one that I know that she talks about is Euclid. Right. So Euclid's geometry. And, in one of her songs, she said Euclid's made to be the fool because these shapes are changing. And Euclid said that you can't curve shapes. And again, it's like these deep, like philosophical components that are brought into the music that have a double meaning if you understand some of them beyond just some musical pieces, which I think is fascinating. And I love it when I hear musicians that do those types of things, not necessarily the philosophical, bringing in a philosopher or different pieces of that, but just that idea that you have to think about the lyrics and yet they convey a message that maybe goes beyond the surface level of it. So
I agree wholeheartedly, Kurt, that's a really important thing for people who listen to lyrics, right? There's some people who pay very little attention to lyrics, but for those who do,
what? Yeah. No, see, this is one of those subjective things. Everybody pays attention to lyrics, right?
I wish, believe you me, I wish that everybody paid attention to lyrics, but they just don't. But even titling the song "Fighting Fish" is an interesting connection of two words. Right, it gets us intrigued a little bit. I wrote a song called "I Get Lonesome Too," and not like the number two, but also, yeah. And I thought, because that line is "I get lonesome" is one thing, right? That's very standard. That's very normal. And that doesn't tell much of a story other than about me. But as soon as I add the word "to," T-O-O, I get lonesome too. Now I bring someone else into the conversation. And it expands the size of the story from just being about me to someone else who is apparently also feeling lonely. And so, like, just something as simple as one more word or just the right word, and this is economic writing at its best, right? When the songwriter can boil a big story down to just a couple of words, like she does with talking about Euclid playing the fool or Zeno's arrow. The references are huge, but the number of words is very economic and small and tells a cool story. I love that about what she does. I think it's just fantastic.
So I wanted to go off of that, because the other thing that she mentioned was this idea of dropping the veil, right? So in writing, to drop the veil, it's that veil of that practice mirror face that she talked about, which again, I just love this concept, because as soon as she said it, I go, yep, you know it, right? You're looking in the mirror and you go, oh, yep, I have to put my chin up. I need to, make sure my eyebrow isn't doing a weird thing, or whatever that would be. And her conversation, like the voicemail message that I'm leaving, and you sound different in your voicemail message, and those, yes, all of those practiced components that are showing a part of us, and we're projecting out this persona that we want to project out. And sometimes you drop those veils of the projection part of it. And when you do that, it leads to a deeper truth and a deeper understanding of the real you. And I think that it can be scary. And I think that it can also be a little self-indulgent sometimes. But if you do it well, then it leads to this really deep understanding. And again, it gets to maybe some of that subjective truth that I have as a individual, and I can understand your subjective truth a little bit better because of the writing that you've done.
Well, and these veils or the mirror faces that we have are stacked on our self-schema and self-identities, right? Excuse me. That they are the kinds of things that when we reveal them, we really are revealing something that's core about ourselves. And we have a natural tendency to be a little protective of that. But at the same time, it's so rewarding to be open, to drop the veil, to actually just share who we are, can be rewarded in lots and lots of wonderful ways. It reminds me a little bit of something that I just lost. I can't. I don't know where I was going somewhere, but I can't remember.
See, but this is the real you, not the polished you. So you better not edit this out, because this is the real part, and we can. That's the thing about the world that we project out, is this world that we want, how we want people to think about us. And yet that's not how we actually are. And I think there's an emotional connection that people get when they see beyond that veil, when they see beyond the practice mirror face. And to that point, I think it's really, really true.
Yeah, the pratfall effect comes to mind as something that Francesca Gino did a great job of demonstrating. And when we see it in other people, we are more endeared to them. It's a good thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, we better wrap this up. And again, I thought it was a fantastic episode, but that's my fanboyism. And we'll come back to that.
Yeah. Stay tuned for a bonus track. Kurt's gonna get through a bonus track here in just a second.
This is Kurt with our bonus track and groove idea for the week. I think it was obvious, at least in the grooving session, that I'm a pretty big fan of Dessa's, and that this episode was special for me. I prepped harder for this session than probably any session that we've done, maybe with the exception of Gary Latham. I hope that came through in a positive way, and I hope our conversation provided you, our listeners, with some insights and fun. So we started the episode by talking about Dessa's new podcast, Deeply Human, where she takes a deep personal look at what lies behind our thoughts and behaviors. We encourage you to go out and give it a listen, even if she did steal our tagline. The conversation about her podcast led us to how important curiosity is in our lives, that learning is something that shouldn't be relegated to the margins of our lives, but it should be front and center. That if we are curious, learning goes from being the vegetables on our plate that we are forced to eat, to the ice cream dessert that we can't get enough of. We touched upon the fact that we can't compare subjective experiences, that we will never know if your red is the same as my red, but that science can sometimes help us understand the subjective collective. We talked about how emotions are central to music, maybe that it is even built into our being through evolution. and that music allows us to synchronize with others. It makes us feel connections which may just be an inherent response to our preference against the wire monkey. It gives us comfort. It can provide solace when needed. Music is also a narrative, one that can lead to shared understanding, where the emotion that is being sung about can relate to the emotion that the listener feels, providing a connection and sense of bonding that helps us both survive, possibly even thrive in this world. Dessa shared her experience in self-experimenting on her brain and using neuroscience to rid herself of her lovesickness. While it was only an N of 1, it was a pretty interesting exploration into how our brains process love and how they work. Okay, so now for the groove idea for this week. Listen closely to a song that emotionally moved you. Do you feel the emotion from the music, from the lyrics, from a combination of those two things, or is it something else? Let us know what you find out. Leave us a note on social media with your answer. With that, Groovers, it's time to end our episode with Dessa. We hope that this week you are inspired to go out and find your groove.